The bullet shattered the window of the general store 3 inches from where Clara Thornton stood counting change. And that was when she knew her brother's debts had finally caught up to their family. She dropped to the floor behind the wooden counter, her heart hammering against her ribs as boots thundered past outside. The year was 1876, and Deadwood, South Dakota was still raw and untamed, a place where men killed for gold and died for less. Her brother James had been one of those men, shot dead 2 months ago over a poker game he had no business playing. He had left behind nothing but trouble and a sister, who was now the target of men who believed she knew where he had hidden their money. Clara pressed her back against the counter, breathing hard through her nose. She was 23 years old and utterly alone in a town that devoured the weak. Her parents had died of fever when she was 17, leaving James to raise her. He had done his best, she supposed, until the gambling took hold of him like a sickness. Now he was gone too, buried in the muddy cemetery on the hill, and she was left to face the consequences of his choices. The shooting stopped. Silence fell over the street outside, broken only by the nervous whinny of a horse. Clara waited, counting her heartbeats, wondering if this was how she would die. Behind a counter in a town that would forget her name before they buried her, the door of the general store creaked open. She heard the slow, deliberate sound of spurs jingling against wooden floorboards, one set of footsteps moving with the kind of caution that spoke of experience. "You can come out, miss," a voice said. It was low and rough, textured like sand. "They are gone for now." Clara did not move. Trust was a currency she could no longer afford. "I am not here to hurt you," the voice continued. "Name is Cole Brennan. I saw those men shooting at you from across the street, figured you might need help." Slowly, Clara raised her head above the counter. The man standing in the doorway was tall and lean, with shoulders that filled out his dusty brown coat. He wore a black hat pulled low over dark eyes, and a gun belt sat easy on his hips. His face was weathered from sun and wind, lined around the eyes in a way that made him look somewhere in his late 20s. There was a hardness to him, but also a steadiness that made Clara think of bedrock beneath shifting sand. "Why would you help me?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Cole Brennan removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. "Because I saw a woman about to get shot, and I was raised to prevent such things when possible." "They will come back," Clara said, standing fully now. Her legs shook, but she locked her knees and refused to show weakness. "They think I have something that belonged to them. Do you?" "No." The word came out sharp and bitter. "My brother gambled away everything we had. If he stole from those men, he spent it before he died or hid it where I will never find it. I have told them this a dozen times, but they do not believe me." Cole studied her for a long moment. His eyes were brown, she noticed, the color of good earth after rain. "How many are there?" "3 that I know of, maybe more." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the summer heat. "They are part of Dutch Keller's gang. You have heard of them?" Cole's expression darkened. "I have heard. Dutch Keller was a name spoken in whispers in Deadwood. He ran most of the illegal gambling and more than a few of the mining operations that did not ask questions about who they employed. Men who crossed him ended up in the ground or disappeared into the Black Hills, never to be seen again." "Then you know I am as good as dead," Clara said flatly. Cole placed his hat back on his head and moved deeper into the store. He had a rolling kind of walk, the gait of a man who spent more time in a saddle than on his feet. "Not necessarily. Dutch Keller is a businessman first. He wants his money. If you can convince him you truly do not have it, he will leave you alone. I have tried convincing him." Clara gestured to the shattered window. "This is his response." Cole was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving around the store, taking in the neat rows of supplies, the carefully organized shelves. "You work here? I own it. My parents left it to me and James. Now it is just mine." She tried to keep the grief out of her voice and mostly succeeded. "For whatever that is worth. A store is worth something, means you have roots, means you are not running." Cole turned back to face her. What if I could help you talk to Keller, explain the situation in a way he might understand? Clara let out a harsh laugh. And why would you do that? You do not know me. This is not your fight. No, it is not, Cole agreed. His eyes held hers, and there was something in that gaze that made her breath catch. Not pity exactly, but a kind of recognition, as if he saw something in her that he understood. But I am making it my fight anyway. Everyone leaves eventually, Clara said quietly. The words came from some deep, wounded place inside her. My parents, my brother, every person I have ever cared about, they all leave or die or disappear. Why should you be any different? Cole Brennan stood there in the dusty light filtering through the broken window, and then he pulled out a chair from the small table near the counter and sat down slowly. He looked up at her with those steady brown eyes and said, "Then I will be the last." The simplicity of it, the quiet certainty in his voice, made something crack open in Clara's chest. She wanted to laugh at him, to tell him he was a fool for making promises he could not keep. But the words would not come. Instead, she found herself nodding once, a jerky movement that barely qualified as agreement. "I do not even know you," she whispered. "Then we will fix that." Cole leaned back in the chair, looking perfectly at ease despite the danger that hung over them both like a storm cloud. "I grew up in Texas, on a ranch that does not exist anymore. Spent the last 8 years working cattle drives, breaking horses, doing whatever work I could find. Came to Deadwood looking for a fresh start, but it seems trouble finds me no matter where I go." He tilted his head slightly. "Your turn." Clara moved around the counter, keeping distance between them out of habit. "Clara Thornton, born here in Deadwood back when it was barely a camp. My parents ran this store and tried to build something decent in an indecent place. James and I were going to keep their dream alive after they died, but he could not stay away from the card tables." She paused, her throat tight. "Now here I am, about to lose everything because of choices that were not even mine." "Not if I can help it," Cole said. "You keep saying that." "But I still do not understand why." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "I had a sister once, younger than me. She got mixed up with the wrong man, and by the time I realized how bad things were, it was too late. He killed her and disappeared before I could make him answer for it." His voice was carefully controlled, but Clara could hear the old pain underneath. "I spent 3 years hunting him, never found him. Eventually I had to accept that some debts do not get paid, some justice does not get served. But I swore that if I ever had the chance to help someone else in trouble, I would not waste it." The air between them felt heavy with shared grief. Clara understood the weight of it, the way loss could reshape a person from the inside out. "I am sorry about your sister." "I am sorry about your brother." Cole stood, his movements fluid despite his size. "But we are both still here, and that means we still have a say in how this ends. Let me help you, Clara, let me try." She wanted to say no. Wanted to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment of trusting someone who would only leave like all the others. But she was tired of being afraid, tired of facing each day alone with nothing but anxiety and grief for company. And there was something about Cole Brennan, something in the set of his shoulders and the steadiness of his gaze that made her want to believe him. "What do you suggest?" she asked finally. "First, we board up that window and close the store for the day. Then we find somewhere safe for you to stay tonight. Tomorrow, I will arrange a meeting with Dutch Keller on neutral ground. We will explain the situation clearly, and if he still wants trouble, then we will deal with that when it comes." Cole moved toward the broken window, already surveying the damage. "But one way or another, you are not facing this alone anymore." Clara watched him work, this stranger who had walked into her life at the exact moment she needed someone most. She did not believe in fate or providence or any of the things the preacher talked about on Sundays. But standing there in the ruins of her ordinary morning, watching Cole Brennan hammer boards across her window with sure, practiced movements, she thought that maybe some coincidences were too perfect to be random. "I do not have money to pay you," she said. Cole looked over his shoulder at her and smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it transformed his face from hard to handsome. "Did I ask for payment?" "No, but everything costs something. That is how the world works." "Maybe my world works different." He turned back to his hammering. "Or maybe I figure that helping someone who needs it is payment enough." Clara did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Instead, she began cleaning up the broken glass scattered across the floor, her hands moving automatically while her mind spun with possibilities and fears. She had spent the last 2 months waiting for the axe to fall, expecting every day to be her last. Now here was this man, this cowboy with sad eyes and a sister's ghost haunting him, offering to stand between her and the darkness. It should have felt like salvation. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something she was not sure she was ready for. They worked in silence for the next hour, boarding up windows and securing the store. Cole moved with the efficiency of someone who had done hard work all his life, and Clara found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he was not looking. He was handsome in a rough way, all sharp angles and weathered skin, the kind of man who would never be called pretty but had something better. Solidity. Realness. The sense that what you saw was what you got, with no false charm or empty promises. When the work was done, Cole wiped his hands on his jeans and surveyed their handiwork. "That will hold for now. Where can you stay tonight?" "I have a room above the store," Clara said. "Not anymore, you do not. If Keller's men come back, that is the first place they will look." Cole adjusted his hat, thinking. "There is a boarding house on the edge of town run by a woman named Martha Henley. Good woman, asks no questions. I will take you there. I cannot just leave my store unguarded. Your store will not matter much if you are dead." Cole's voice was gentle but firm. "One night, Clara, just to be safe." She wanted to argue, but the exhaustion of the last 2 months suddenly crashed over her like a wave. She was tired of being strong, tired of pretending she had everything under control when her whole world was crumbling around her. "All right," she said quietly. "One night." Cole nodded, satisfied. "Pack what you need. We will go out the back way, just in case anyone is watching." Clara moved through the store gathering her things, acutely aware of Cole's presence behind her. He stood near the door, relaxed but alert, his hand resting casually near his gun. She realized that he was watching the street, putting himself between her and any potential danger. The gesture should not have moved her as much as it did. She packed quickly, throwing clothes and necessities into a worn carpet bag. When she emerged from the back room, Cole took the bag from her without a word and gestured for her to follow. They slipped out through the rear entrance into the narrow alley that ran behind the buildings on Main Street. The afternoon sun beat down on them as they moved quickly through the back ways of Deadwood. The town sprawled across the gulch in chaotic fashion, buildings thrown up wherever there was space, streets that curved and twisted following the path of least resistance. It was not a pretty place, but it was alive with a kind of desperate energy that Clara had always found both thrilling and terrifying. They reached the boarding house without incident. It was a plain 2-story building on the outskirts of town, respectably shabby but clean. Cole knocked on the door, and a moment later it opened to reveal a stout woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and sharp blue eyes. "Cole Brennan," she said, her voice warm with recognition. "I have not seen you in a month. Thought maybe you had moved on." "Still here, Martha." Cole removed his hat. "This is Clara Thornton. She needs a room for a few nights, somewhere quiet and safe." Martha's gaze moved to Clara, assessing her in one quick glance. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded briskly. "I have a room at the back, away from the street. 30 cents a night, meals included." "I will pay for a week," Cole said, reaching for his pocket. "No." Clara put her hand on his arm without thinking, then quickly pulled it back. "I can pay my own way." Cole looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. But let me at least cover tonight. Call it an apology for the broken window. You did not break my window." "No, but I am trying to be chivalrous here. Work with me." Despite everything, Clara felt a smile tug at her lips. "Fine, one night." Martha led them inside to a small room at the rear of the house. It was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the scrubby hills behind town. Clara set her bag down and turned to find Cole still standing in the doorway. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. Thank me when this is over and you are safe." Cole settled his hat back on his head. "I will come by in the morning. We will figure out our next move then." He turned to leave, but Clara found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "Cole, why do I feel like you are going to do something dangerous tonight?" He looked back at her, and there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or appreciation for her perceptiveness. "Because you are smart enough to know that talking to Dutch Keller's men requires preparation." "Do not worry, I have been in worse situations and survived. That is not as reassuring as you think it is." Cole's smile was there and gone like a ghost. "Get some rest, Clara. I will see you tomorrow." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hall, leaving Clara alone in the unfamiliar room. She sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel the full weight of the day. A few hours ago she had been alone and terrified, waiting for death to find her. Now she had an ally, a stranger who had appointed himself her protector for reasons she still did not fully understand. Everyone leaves eventually. The words echoed in her mind, a mantra she had repeated so many times it had become gospel. But Cole had sat down and promised to be the last, and something about that promise had lodged itself in her chest like a thorn she could not remove. She did not love him. She barely knew him. But she felt something, some fragile thread of hope that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time someone would stay. Clara lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the boarding house settling around her. From somewhere, downstairs came the murmur of voices and the clatter of dishes. Normal sounds of normal life, a world away from bullets and broken windows and the constant fear that had been her companion for weeks. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it would feel like to be truly safe. To have someone she could rely on, someone who would not leave or die or disappear into the shadows of her past. It was a dangerous thing to want, she knew. Hope was a luxury she could not afford. But as she drifted towards sleep, exhausted and wrung out and more vulnerable than she had been in years, Clara allowed herself to hope anyway. Just a little. Just enough to make tomorrow seem possible. Night fell over Deadwood like a curtain, and somewhere in the darkness, Cole Brennan was making good on his promise. Clara did not know where he had gone or what he was doing, but she trusted that he knew what he was about. It was a strange feeling, trust. She had forgotten what it felt like. She slept fitfully, waking several times to unfamiliar sounds. Each time she lay in the darkness and thought about the cowboy with the steady hands and the sad eyes, and wondered what kind of man voluntarily walked into danger for a stranger. A good man, probably, or a foolish one. Maybe both. Morning came slowly, gray light filtering through the window. Clara rose and washed her face in the basin, then dressed in a simple blue calico dress that had seen better days. Her reflection in the small mirror over the washstand showed a woman who looked older than her 23 years, with shadows under hazel eyes and a wariness that never quite left her expression. She had been pretty once, she thought, before grief and fear had carved away the softness. She made her way downstairs to find Martha in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the handful of boarders. The older woman looked up as Clara entered and gestured to the table. "Sit. You look like you could use a good meal." Martha set a plate of eggs and biscuits in front of her, along with a cup of strong coffee. "Cole told me you have been having trouble. Did he tell you what kind of trouble?" "No, and I did not ask. I have lived in Deadwood long enough to know that some questions are better left unspoken." Martha poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from Clara. "But I will tell you this. Cole Brennan is a good man. If he has taken an interest in your situation, you are in capable hands. You know him well enough. He has been boarding here off and on for the past 6 months. Works odd jobs, mostly breaking horses for the ranches outside town. He is quiet, keeps to himself, always pays his rent on time. Martha paused, her gaze shrewd. He does not usually involve himself in other people's problems. You must have made quite an impression. Clara did not know what to say to that, so she focused on her breakfast. The food was simple but good, and she realized she could not remember the last time she had eaten a full meal. The past weeks had been a blur of anxiety and survival, each day bleeding into the next. She was finishing her coffee when the front door opened and Cole walked in. He looked tired, with dust on his clothes and a shadow of stubble on his jaw, but his eyes were alert. He nodded to Martha, then turned his attention to Clara. "We need to talk," he said simply. They stepped outside onto the front porch, away from listening ears. The morning was already warm, promising another hot day. In the distance, Clara could hear the sounds of Deadwood waking up, the rumble of wagons and the shouts of men heading to the mines. "I found Dutch Keller last night," Cole said without preamble. "Had a conversation with him about your situation." Clara's heart kicked hard against her ribs. And he is willing to meet with you today at noon at the saloon on Lee Street. He will hear you out, but Clara, I need you to understand something. Dutch Keller is not a forgiving man. If he thinks you are lying to him, if he believes for 1 second that you are hiding his money, he will not hesitate to hurt you. "I am not hiding anything," Clara said fiercely. "James spent or lost everything. There is no secret stash, no buried gold, just debts and broken promises. I believe you, but Keller needs to believe you too, and that is going to take more than just words." Cole leaned against the porch rail, his expression thoughtful. "I have an idea, but you are not going to like it. Tell me, your store, the deed is in your name, right?" "Yes, but I do not understand what that has to do with anything." Cole's gaze was steady and serious. "You offer to sell it to him. At a fair price, enough to cover whatever your brother owed. It would give him something tangible, proof that you are serious about making this right." Clara felt like she had been punched in the chest. "My store is all I have left. It is my parents' legacy, the only thing that connects me to them." "I know," Cole's voice was gentle. "And I would not suggest it if I saw any other way, but think about it, Clara. What good is a store if you are not alive to run it? What kind of legacy is it if it gets you killed?" She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that there had to be another solution. But deep down she knew he was right. The store was just a building, just wood and glass and inventory. It could be replaced, her life could not. "How much do you think he would pay?" she asked quietly. "Enough. The location is prime, right on Main Street. Someone will want it." Cole straightened, moving closer to her. "But Clara, listen to me. This is only if you want to do it. If you say no, we will find another way. I am not going to force you into anything." She looked up at him, at this man who had inserted himself into her life with such determination. The morning light caught the planes of his face, highlighting the strength in his jaw and the concern in his eyes. He meant what he said, she realized. He would stand by her no matter what she decided. "If I sell the store, I will have nothing," she said. "No livelihood, no home, no purpose." "You will have your life," Cole replied. "And that is worth more than any building. The rest we can figure out later. The rest." As if there would be a later, as if they had a future beyond this immediate crisis. Clara found herself wanting to believe in that possibility more than she had wanted anything in a long time. "All right," she said, the words coming out stronger than she felt. "I will offer him the store. But I want to be the one to negotiate the price. This is my family's legacy. I owe it to my parents to make sure it goes for what it is worth." Cole nodded, respect clear in his expression. "Fair enough. I will be with you the whole time. If things go wrong, if he tries anything, we leave. No deal is worth your safety. You keep saying we, you do not have to be part of this, Cole. Meeting with Dutch Keller is dangerous for you too." "I told you I was making this my fight." Cole's voice was firm. "I do not say things I do not mean. Then I will be the last." The words hung in the air between them, unspoken but present. Clara felt something shift in her chest, some locked door beginning to open despite her best efforts to keep it closed. She barely knew this man, had no reason to trust him beyond his actions and his words. But something in her, some deep instinct, believed him in a way she had not believed anyone in years. "We should get ready," she said, breaking the moment before it could become too much. "If we are meeting Keller at noon, I want to look like someone he should take seriously. Clara." Cole waited until she met his eyes. "You already look like someone to be taken seriously, but if changing clothes makes you feel more confident, do what you need to do." They spent the next few hours preparing. Clara returned to her room and changed into her best dress, a deep green that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her dark hair up in a style that was both practical and elegant, then studied herself in the mirror. She looked like a woman going to a business meeting, not a frightened girl about to confront the man who wanted her dead. That was good. She needed to be strong now more than ever. Cole was waiting for her in the boarding house parlor when she came down. He had cleaned up as well, his face freshly shaved and his clothes brushed free of dust. He wore a dark vest over a clean shirt, and his gun belt sat at his hip, a reminder of the danger they were walking into. "You look ready," he said simply. "I do not feel ready." "But I suppose that does not matter." "No." Cole offered her his arm, a strangely formal gesture. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear." Clara took his arm, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fabric of his shirt. They walked together through the streets of Deadwood, and Clara was intensely aware of every glance thrown their way, every whispered conversation that stopped as they passed. News traveled fast in a small town. People would know by now that she was marked by Dutch Keller, that associating with her was dangerous. But Cole walked beside her with his head high and his stride confident, as if daring anyone to question his choice. The saloon on Lee Street was quieter during the day, though a handful of die-hard gamblers still hunched over their cards in the dim interior. Cole pushed through the doors and immediately scanned the room, his hand hovering near his gun. Clara followed close behind, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Dutch Keller sat at a table in the back corner, flanked by two large men who looked like they ate nails for breakfast. Keller himself was surprisingly ordinary-looking, a man in his 40s with thinning hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore an expensive suit that looked out of place in the rough saloon, and he watched them approach with eyes that were as cold and empty as a snake's. "Miss Thornton," he said as they reached his table. His voice was smooth and cultured, which somehow made him more frightening. "I am glad you decided to accept my invitation. Please sit." Clara sat in the chair across from him, acutely aware that Cole remained standing behind her, a silent presence at her back. The two men flanking Keller watched them with undisguised hostility, but Keller himself seemed almost pleasant. "I understand you wanted to discuss your brother's debt," Keller continued, folding his hands on the table in front of him. "I must admit, I was surprised when your friend here came to see me last night. Most people in your position simply try to run." "I have nowhere to run," Clara said, keeping her voice steady. "And I am not interested in running anyway. I came to make you an offer." Keller's eyebrows rose slightly. "An offer? How intriguing. Please continue." Clara took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze directly. "My brother owed you money. I do not know how much, but I assume it was substantial." $3,000, Keller said, "plus interest. It has been 2 months since his unfortunate demise. The debt now stands at $3,500. It might as well have been $35,000 for all the chance Clara had of paying it. She felt Cole shift slightly behind her, a reminder that she was not alone. "I do not have that kind of money, but I do have something you might want. My store on Main Street. Prime location, established customer base, profitable if run properly. I am willing to sell it to you at a fair market value to settle my brother's debt." Keller was quiet for a long moment, studying her. Clara forced herself not to fidget, not to show any sign of the terror churning in her gut. Finally, Keller leaned back in his chair and smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Your store is worth perhaps $2,000, maybe $2,500 at best. That still leaves a significant balance. Then I will work off the rest." The words came out before Clara could think better of them. "I will work in the store after you take ownership without pay until the debt is satisfied." "Clara, no," Cole said sharply behind her, but Keller was nodding, his smile widening. "Now that is an interesting proposition. You would essentially be my employee, working to pay off your brother's mistakes. How very noble of you." "How long?" Clara asked, ignoring Cole's protest. "How long would I need to work to clear the remaining debt?" Keller made a show of calculating in his head. "At reasonable wages, accounting for room and board since you would need somewhere to live, I would say approximately 1 year should cover it." 1 year. 12 months of working for a man who had wanted her dead just yesterday. It was insane. It was the only option they had. 6 months, Cole said, his voice hard. "She works 6 months at full wages with no deductions for room and board. She finds her own lodging. And you provide a contract stating that at the end of 6 months, all debts are considered paid and she is free to go with no further obligations." Keller's gaze moved to Cole for the first time, really looking at him. "And who exactly are you to be negotiating terms? Someone who is making sure this deal is fair." Cole's hand rested on his gun, not threatening, just present. 6 months, full wages, contract in writing, those are the terms. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. The two men flanking Keller both straightened, their hands moving toward their weapons. Clara held her breath, certain that violence was about to erupt, then Keller laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "You have nerve, I will give you that. Coming into my meeting dictating terms." He shook his head, still chuckling. "But you know what, I like nerve, it is so rare to find these days, all right. 6 months, full wages, contract in writing. Miss Thornton works in the store for 6 months, and at the end of that time, all debts are forgiven and she walks away free and clear." Clara could not believe what she was hearing. "You agree to those terms?" "I do, on one condition." Keller leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Your friend here stays in town for the duration. I want to make sure you have proper motivation to hold up your end of the bargain." "That is not necessary," Clara started to say, but Cole cut her off. "I will be staying anyway." His voice was calm, matter of fact. "I have work here. But let me make something clear, Keller. If anything happens to Clara during these 6 months, if she is harmed or threatened or mistreated in any way, the deal is off and you will answer to me." "Understood." Keller's smile never wavered, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "I am a businessman, not a monster. Miss Thornton will be treated fairly as long as she holds up her end. You have my word." The word of a criminal and a killer, it should have been worthless, but Clara found herself nodding, accepting it because she had no other choice. "When do I start?" "Today, if you are willing. I will have my lawyer draw up the contract this afternoon. You can sign it tomorrow and begin work immediately after." Keller stood, smoothing down his expensive jacket. "I believe this is the beginning of a mutually beneficial arrangement, Miss Thornton. I get a profitable store and you get your life. Everyone wins." He extended his hand across the table. Clara looked at it for a long moment, this hand that had ordered so much violence and pain, then reached out and shook it. His grip was cool and dry, professional. "Like making a deal with the devil in a 3-piece suit." "Pleasure doing business with you," Keller said. Then he and his men swept out of the saloon, leaving Clara and Cole alone in the dim interior. Clara sat frozen for a moment, unable to quite believe what had just happened. Then the reality of it crashed over her and she started to shake, great trembling waves that rattled through her body. Cole was there immediately, his hands on her shoulders, steadying her. "Breathe," he said quietly. "You are all right, you did it." "I just sold my life for the next 6 months to a man who wanted me dead yesterday," Clara said through chattering teeth. "How is that all right?" "Because you are alive and the debt is going to be settled. That is as good as we could have hoped for." Cole guided her to her feet, keeping a steadying hand on her elbow. "Come on, let us get you out of here." They walked back to the boarding house in silence. Clara's mind was spinning, trying to process everything that had just happened. She had walked into that saloon expecting to die and walked out having negotiated 6 months of servitude. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, she just felt numb. Martha took one look at Clara's face when they arrived and immediately shooed them both into the parlor with cups of tea. Clara sat on the worn sofa and wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting the heat seep into her cold fingers. "You did good in there," Cole said, sitting beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Better than good. You were strong and smart, and you negotiated a deal that could have been much worse." "I know," Clara stared into her tea, "but I cannot shake the feeling that I just made a terrible mistake. Maybe you did, maybe you did not, but it was your choice to make and you made it. That counts for something." Cole set down his own cup and turned to face her fully. "Clara, I meant what I told Keller. I am staying in town for the next 6 months. I will be here to make sure he keeps his word. You do not have to do that. You have your own life to live. My life can wait. This is more important." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took one of her hands in his. His palm was calloused and warm, solid and real. "I told you I would be the last one to leave. I meant it." Clara looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers wrapped around hers with such care. She should pull away, should protect herself from the inevitable hurt when he broke his promise like everyone else had. But she did not want to. For the first time in months, she felt like she was not completely alone, and that feeling was worth any future pain. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. You do not need to thank me." Cole squeezed her hand gently, then released it. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." He was right about that. The next morning, Clara met with Keller's lawyer, a pinched-faced man who presented her with a contract that was surprisingly fair. It outlined her duties, her wages, and the exact terms of her employment. Most importantly, it stated clearly that at the end of 6 months, all debts would be considered satisfied, and she would be free of any obligation to Dutch Keller or his organization. Clara signed her name at the bottom, watching the ink dry and feeling like she was signing away a piece of herself. But she was alive, and she had a plan, and that was more than she had 3 days ago. She moved what belongings she had back into the room above the store, though Martha insisted she keep her room at the boarding house available if she ever needed it. Cole helped her carry boxes up the narrow stairs, and when they were done, he stood in the doorway and looked around the small space that was both her home and her prison for the next 6 months. "You will be all right here?" he asked. "I have to be." Clara set down the last box and turned to face him. "Cole, I know you said you are staying, but you do not have to check on me every day. I can manage. I know you can, but I am going to check on you anyway," he smiled slightly. "I am stubborn that way, I have noticed." Over the next weeks, a routine developed. Clara worked in the store from dawn until dusk, serving customers and managing inventory under the watchful eye of one of Keller's men who showed up every few days to check on things. The work was familiar and oddly comforting, a reminder of better times when her parents had run the place with laughter and love, and every evening, like clockwork, Cole would appear at the store just as she was closing up. Sometimes he helped her tally the day's receipts. Sometimes he just sat at the small table in the back room and talked to her while she worked. He told her stories about growing up in Texas, about cattle drives and wild horses and skies so big they seemed to swallow the world. She told him about her childhood in Deadwood, about her parents and her brother and the life she had thought she would have. They never talked about the future. It felt too dangerous, too presumptuous to imagine a time beyond the 6 months that hung over them like a deadline. But Clara found herself looking forward to those evening visits more than she wanted to admit. Cole was easy to be around, comfortable in a way that made her feel less alone. He listened when she talked and never tried to minimize her fears or tell her everything would be fine. He just sat with her in whatever she was feeling, and that simple act of presence meant more than any empty reassurance could have. A month passed, then 2. The summer heat gave way to the cooler days of autumn. Deadwood began to take on a different character as the leaves turned gold in the gulches, and the first hints of winter appeared in the mountain air. Clara settled into her strange new life, working for a criminal and being courted by a cowboy who refused to leave. Because that was what it was, she realized one evening as she watched Cole repair a broken shelf in the store. He was courting her in the old-fashioned way, with actions instead of words, with steadfastness and care and the kind of patient attention that said he was willing to wait for however long it took. The realization should have scared her. Instead, it filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the stove in the corner. "You are staring at me," Cole said without looking up from his work. Clara felt her cheeks heat. "I was just thinking about how strange this all is. 2 months ago I thought I was going to die. Now I am working for the man who wanted to kill me, being protected by a cowboy I barely know, and somehow it feels almost normal." Cole set down his hammer and turned to face her. "Do you still barely know me, after all these evenings spent talking?" "No," Clara admitted. "I suppose I know you fairly well now." "Good. Because I know you too, Clara Thornton. I know you are brave and stubborn and more resilient than you give yourself credit for. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar and you hum when you are counting inventory. I know you are terrified of trusting people because everyone you have ever trusted has left you." He moved closer, his eyes serious. "And I know that scares you more than anything Dutch Keller could do." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "You see too much. Maybe. Or maybe I am just paying attention." Cole reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "I am not going to leave, Clara. I know you do not believe me yet, but I am going to keep showing up until you do." "Everyone leaves eventually," she whispered, the old mantra automatic on her lips. "Then I will be the last." He said it just like he had that first day, with the same quiet certainty, as if it was simply a fact and not a promise that could be broken. "How many more times do I need to prove that before you believe it?" Clara did not have an answer for him. So instead of speaking, she did something that surprised them both. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was not a practiced kiss or a passionate one. It was simple and sweet and tasted like hope. Cole froze for a half-second, then his arms came around her, pulling her closer. He kissed her back with a gentleness that made tears prick at her eyes, as if she was something precious that might break. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Cole rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he murmured. "I know, I could tell." Clara let herself stay in the circle of his arms, feeling safer than she had in years. "I was too scared to let you. And now I am still scared, but I am tired of letting fear make all my decisions." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "I like you, Cole Brennan, more than I should considering the situation, but I need you to understand something. I cannot make promises about the future. I do not know what happens when these 6 months are over. I do not know if I will stay in Deadwood or leave, if I will rebuild or start fresh somewhere new. All I know is right now." "Right now is enough," Cole said. He kissed her again, soft and sweet. "We will figure out the rest as we go." And so they did. The weeks continued to pass, and with each one, Clara found herself falling deeper in love with the cowboy who had walked into her life at exactly the right moment. He courted her properly, with stolen kisses in the back room of the store and walks through town in the evening air. He treated her with respect and care, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, content to let their relationship unfold at its own pace. Martha noticed, of course. One evening when Clara stopped by the boarding house to collect some items she had stored there, the older woman cornered her in the hallway with a knowing smile. "You and Cole seem to have become close," Martha said. Clara felt her cheeks warm. "He has been very kind to me." "Kind?" Martha laughed. "That boy looks at you like you hang the moon and stars, and unless I am much mistaken, you look at him the same way." "Is it that obvious? To everyone except perhaps the two of you." Martha's expression softened. "He is a good man, Clara, one of the best I have ever met." If you have found something with him, do not let it go out of fear. Sometimes the best things in life are the scariest. Clara thought about those words often in the days that followed. She was falling in love truly and completely for the first time in her life. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Cole had become essential to her, as necessary as breathing. She found herself measuring her days by the moment he would walk through the door of the store, his smile just for her. But the shadow of their deal with Keller hung over everything. Clara could not forget that she was essentially owned by a criminal for the next several months, that her freedom was conditional and precarious. What would happen when the 6 months were over? Would Cole truly stay, or would he move on to the next person who needed saving? She tried not to think about it, tried to live in the moment as Cole had suggested. But the fears crept in during the long nights when she lay alone in her room above the store, listening to the sounds of Deadwood settling around her. Winter arrived properly in November, bringing snow to the Black Hills and a bitter cold that seeped through every crack and crevice. The store became a haven for people seeking warmth and supplies, and Clara worked long hours keeping up with demand. Cole helped whenever he could, hauling wood for the stove and making deliveries when the streets became too icy for Clara to navigate safely. One particularly cold evening in early December, as they sat together in the back room with the stove burning bright, Cole took her hand and said, "I have been thinking about the future." Clara's heart skipped. "Have you? These 6 months are more than half over. In a few more weeks you will be free of your obligation to Keller. Have you thought about what you want to do after?" "Every day," Clara admitted, "but I still have no answers. Everything I built my life around is gone, my family, my store, my plans. I have to start over from nothing, and I have no idea where to even begin." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing slow circles on the back of her hand. "What if you did not have to start over alone?" Clara's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I love you, Clara Thornton." The words came out simple and direct, no flowery speeches or elaborate declarations, just truth, plain and honest. "I have loved you since the first day I met you, when you stood behind that counter looking terrified but refusing to show it. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you hum when you count inventory. I love every single thing about you, and I want to build a future with you if you will have me." Tears blurred Clara's vision. "Cole, You do not have to answer now," he said quickly. "I know you are still scared. I know you do not fully trust that I will stay, but I am asking you to take a chance on me anyway. When your 6 months are up, let me take you away from here. We can go anywhere you want. Texas, California, Oregon. Somewhere fresh where neither of us has history haunting us. We can start over together, build something new. I have some money saved, enough to buy a piece of land or start a small ranch. It would not be easy, but we would have each other." Clara could not speak around the lump in her throat. She had wanted this, dreamed of it in the secret places of her heart that she was afraid to acknowledge, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real and terrifying. "What if it does not work?" she whispered. "What if you change your mind, or I am not who you think I am, or everything falls apart?" "Then we will deal with it together." Cole pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. "Clara, life does not come with guarantees. People die and leave and disappoint us. That is the risk we take by loving anyone. But the alternative is to live alone and scared, never taking chances, never opening up to the possibility of something good. And that is not living at all." He was right. Clara knew he was right. She had spent the last 2 months living in fear of the future, protecting her heart from potential pain. But in doing so, she had also been protecting it from joy and love, and all the things that made life worth living. "I love you too," she said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "I have loved you for weeks and been too scared to admit it. But yes, Cole, yes to all of it. When these 6 months are over, let us leave this place behind and start fresh. Together." Cole pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his face transformed by a smile that was brighter than anything Clara had ever seen. Then he kissed her, deep and slow and full of promise. This was not a tentative kiss or a careful one. This was a kiss that spoke of futures and forever, of two people choosing each other against all odds. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. Cole rested his forehead against hers and let out a breathless laugh. "I was terrified you were going to say no." "I was terrified I was going to say yes," Clara replied, "but I am glad I did." They spent the rest of the evening making plans. Cole talked about the kind of land he wanted to find, somewhere with good water and enough space to raise horses. Clara talked about maybe having a small garden, growing vegetables like her mother used to. They spun dreams together in the warm glow of the stove, and for the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to believe in a future that was not defined by loss and fear. The next weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Clara counted down the days until her 6-month obligation would be complete. Keller had kept his word, treating her fairly and not interfering with her work beyond the occasional check-in from his men. It was strange to think that the man who had once wanted her dead was now simply her employer, but Clara had learned that in Deadwood, stranger things happened every day. On a cold morning in late December, Clara woke to find fresh snow blanketing the town. It was the kind of pristine white that made everything look clean and new, covering the mud and dirt of the streets in a temporary beauty. She stood at her window and watched the sun rise over the black hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Today marked exactly 5 months since she had made her deal with Keller. 1 more month and she would be free. She dressed and went downstairs to open the store, humming to herself as she went about the familiar routine. The morning passed quietly, with only a few customers braving the cold to purchase supplies. Clara was restocking shelves when the door opened and Dutch Keller himself walked in. She froze, her heart immediately kicking into high gear. Keller had not personally visited the store since the day she signed the contract. His presence now, so close to the end of her obligation, felt ominous. "Miss Thornton," Keller said pleasantly, brushing snow from his expensive coat. "Good morning. I hope I am not disturbing you." "Not at all," Clara managed to say. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to speak with you about your contract." Keller moved deeper into the store, his gaze sweeping over the neat shelves and well-organized space. "You have done excellent work here over the past 5 months. The store is more profitable now than it has been in years. You have a real talent for this." "Thank you." Clara kept her voice neutral, unsure where this was going. "In fact, your work has been so impressive that I would like to make you an offer." Keller turned to face her fully. "When your contract is complete in 1 month, I would like you to stay on as manager of the store. Full salary plus a percentage of the profits. You would have complete autonomy over the day-to-day operations. It is a generous offer, more than fair." Clara's mind raced. A month ago, even a week ago, such an offer might have been tempting. Stable employment, good money, the chance to keep running the store that had been her family's legacy. But now, with Cole's proposal fresh in her heart and a future stretching out before her, Keller's offer felt like a cage wrapped in gold paper. "I am flattered," she said carefully, "but I need time to think about it, of course. Take all the time you need." Keller smiled, but there was something calculating in his eyes. "Though I should mention that this offer is contingent on you staying in Deadwood. If you were to leave town, well, the offer would no longer be available." It was not a threat exactly. But it was close enough to make Clara's skin prickle with unease. Keller knew. Somehow he knew about her plans with Cole and he was trying to manipulate her into staying. "I understand," Clara said. "I will give you my answer before the contract expires. That is all I ask." Keller tipped his hat to her and left, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft chime. Clara stood frozen in the middle of the store, her mind whirling. She needed to talk to Cole, needed to figure out what this new development meant for their plans. But before she could even begin to process it, the door opened again and Cole himself walked in, snow dusting his shoulders. He took one look at her face and his expression darkened. "What happened?" Clara told him everything, the words spilling out in a rush. Cole listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter with each sentence. "He is trying to control you," Cole said when she finished. "Trying to keep you here where he can use you. Or maybe he genuinely thinks I am good at running the store and wants to keep a valuable employee," Clara suggested, though she did not really believe it. "Maybe, but I do not trust Keller as far as I could throw him." Cole paced across the store, his agitation clear. "What do you want to do?" "I want to leave with you like we planned," Clara said it without hesitation. "I do not care about Keller's offer or staying in Deadwood. I want to start over somewhere new with you." Cole stopped pacing and turned to face her, relief clear on his face. "You are sure?" "I am sure." Clara moved to him, taking his hands in hers. "This place holds nothing but bad memories for me now. My family is gone, my store belongs to someone else, and I am tired of living in the shadow of my brother's mistakes. I want to leave it all behind and build something new. With you." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Then that is what we will do. 1 more month and we are gone." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. 2 weeks later, on a frigid January morning, everything changed. Clara was opening the store when she heard shouting from down the street. She stepped outside to see what the commotion was about and saw a crowd gathering near the bank. Her stomach dropped. In Deadwood, crowds usually meant trouble. She was about to go back inside when she saw Cole pushing through the throng of people, moving against the flow. Their eyes met across the distance and her heart stopped. Something was very wrong. Cole reached her, breathing hard. "Clara, we need to leave right now." "What? Why? What is happening?" The bank was just robbed. 3 men, and from the descriptions I am hearing, it sounds like some of Keller's crew. Cole glanced over his shoulder, his expression grim. If his men are robbing banks in broad daylight, that means something has gone wrong with his organization. And when criminals get desperate, they get dangerous. Clara felt cold all over. "You think they will come after me? I think we should not wait around to find out." Cole took her arm, already pulling her toward the boarding house. "Pack your things. We are leaving today." "But my contract is not up for another 2 weeks. If I leave now, Keller will say I broke our agreement." "I do not care what Keller says. I care about keeping you safe." Cole's voice was hard, leaving no room for argument. "Clara, listen to me. Whatever is happening in Keller's organization, it is not good. I am not going to risk your life for the sake of 2 more weeks. We leave today, and if Keller has a problem with that, he can take it up with me." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to say that she did not run from her obligations. But one look at Cole's face told her that this was not up for debate. He was genuinely scared for her, and that fear was contagious. "All right," she said. "Let me get my things." They moved quickly, gathering Clara's belongings from the room above the store and her few possessions still at Martha's boarding house. Cole went to collect his own things and his horse from the livery stable while Clara said a quick goodbye to Martha, promising to write once they were settled somewhere. Within 2 hours, they were ready to leave. Cole had purchased a second horse for Clara and loaded their belongings onto a pack mule. They stood at the edge of town, ready to ride out, when a group of riders blocked their path. Dutch Keller sat at the center of the group, flanked by 6 armed men. His face was expressionless, but his eyes were cold with fury. "Going somewhere, Miss Thornton?" he asked pleasantly. Clara's hand tightened on her reins. "My contract is almost complete. I am leaving early. Consider the last 2 weeks a loss." "I am afraid I cannot do that." Keller urged his horse forward a few steps. "We had an agreement. 6 months of work in exchange for your brother's debt. You do not get to unilaterally decide when that agreement ends." "She is done, Keller." Cole's hand moved to his gun. "Whatever is happening with your organization, it does not concern her. Let us pass." "I am afraid I cannot do that either." Keller's smile never wavered. "You see, there have been some developments in my business operations. Things are not as stable as they once were, and I need every asset I can control. Miss Thornton's store is valuable, and so is her skill at running it. I cannot afford to let her leave." "You do not own me," Clara said, anger overriding her fear. "Our contract expires in 2 weeks." After that, I am free to go wherever I want. True. But until then, you still work for me, and I am ordering you to return to the store immediately." Keller's eyes shifted to Cole. "As for you, I think it is time you left Deadwood. You have been a disruptive influence, and I no longer have patience for it." Cole laughed, harsh and humorless. "If you think I am leaving Clara here alone, you are insane. Then I suppose we have a problem." Keller made a small gesture, and his men all drew their weapons. The street went very quiet. Clara could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could feel Cole tensing beside her, preparing for violence. They were outnumbered and outgunned. If shooting started, they would not survive. "Wait," Clara said, her voice ringing clear in the cold air. "Wait. Let us talk about this rationally." "There is nothing to talk about," Keller said. "You will honor your contract or face the consequences." "And what consequences are those? Will you kill me?" Clara urged her horse forward a few steps, directly facing Keller despite Cole's hissed protest. "Because that defeats the purpose, does it not? You cannot use my skills if I am dead." Keller's expression flickered just for a moment. "No, but I can kill your friend here. Is that what you want?" Fear clawed at Clara's throat, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "If you kill Cole, I will never work for you again. Contract or no contract, I will burn that store to the ground before I let you profit from it. So if you truly value my work, truly need me as much as you claim, then you will let us both leave. Right now. Today." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Clara held Keller's gaze, refusing to back down, even as her hands shook on the reins. She was bluffing, gambling everything on the hope that Keller valued his investment more than his pride. Finally, Keller let out a long breath and lowered his weapon. His men followed suit, though they kept their hands near their guns. "You have courage, I will give you that," Keller said. "More than your brother ever did. Very well, Miss Thornton, you may leave and I will consider our contract satisfied. But understand this. You are making a powerful enemy today. If you ever return to Deadwood, there will be consequences." "I have no intention of ever returning," Clara said. "Goodbye, Mr. Keller." She turned her horse and rode past his men, her spine straight and her head high. Cole followed close behind, his hand still hovering near his gun until they were well clear of the group. Neither of them spoke until they were a mile outside of town, following the trail that led south toward Wyoming. Only then did Clara allow herself to slump in the saddle, shaking with reaction. Cole immediately pulled his horse alongside hers, reaching out to steady her. "That was the bravest and most foolish thing I have ever seen," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You could have gotten us both killed, but I did not." Clara looked at him, tears streaming down her face now that the adrenaline was fading. "We are free, Cole. We are actually free." Cole stared at her for a long moment, then let out a shaky laugh. "We are, God help me, we actually are." He leaned over and kissed her, hard and fierce and tasting of relief. "Let us get far away from here before he changes his mind." They rode hard for the rest of the day, putting as many miles between themselves and Deadwood as possible. When darkness fell, they made camp in a sheltered hollow and huddled together for warmth against the winter cold. Cole built a fire and they sat close to it, eating cold rations and watching the stars come out overhead. "Where do we go now?" Clara asked, leaning against Cole's shoulder. "South first to get clear of this weather, then west, I think. I have heard there is good land in Wyoming, cheap enough for what I have saved. We could build something there. A ranch maybe, or a small farm, whatever you want." "I want a home," Clara said softly. "A real home where we can put down roots and not worry about running or hiding or looking over our shoulders. Then that is what we will build." Cole wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "It will not be easy, starting over never is, but we will do it together." Clara closed her eyes, letting herself believe it. They had escaped Deadwood, escaped her brother's debts and Keller's control and all the ghosts that had haunted her for so long. Now they had a chance to build something new, something that was entirely their own. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now. "I love you too." Cole kissed the top of her head, And I promise you, Clara, I am never leaving. Not tomorrow, not next year, not ever. You are stuck with me for the rest of your life." "Good," Clara said, and meant it with her whole heart. They traveled for 2 weeks, following the trails south and west through Wyoming territory. The journey was hard, with bitter cold and difficult terrain, but Clara found she did not mind. Every mile they traveled was a mile away from her old life, a mile closer to whatever future they were building together. They talked for hours as they rode, sharing stories and dreams and all the small details that make up a life. Cole told her about his childhood in Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk and spending summers sleeping under the stars while the cattle grazed nearby. Clara told him about her mother's garden and her father's laugh, about James before the gambling took hold of him. They learned each other in those long days on the trail, the way you can only learn someone when there are no distractions, no routines to hide behind. Clara discovered that Cole sang quietly to himself when he thought she was not listening, old trail songs in a surprisingly pleasant voice. Cole discovered that Clara could ride better than most men he knew, and had a wicked sense of humor that came out when she felt safe enough to let her guard down. By the time they reached the small town of Laramie in late January, Clara felt like she had known Cole for years instead of months. He had become as essential to her as breathing, as necessary as her own heartbeat. They found a small hotel in Laramie and rented a room, collapsing onto the bed in exhausted relief. After 2 weeks of sleeping on frozen ground, the simple luxury of a mattress and warm blankets felt like heaven. "We should stay here a few days," Cole said, lying on his back and staring at the ceiling. "Rest up, resupply, figure out our next move." "Agreed." Clara turned on her side to look at him. "Cole, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Back in Deadwood, when you said we would build a life together, what exactly did you mean by that?" Cole turned his head to meet her eyes. "I meant that I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to build a home with you and wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want whatever future we can make together." He paused. "I know I should have asked properly, should have gotten down on one knee with a ring and everything, but Clara Thornton, will you marry me?" Clara felt tears welling up, but they were good tears this time, born of happiness instead of fear. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." Cole's smile was brilliant. He pulled her close and kissed her deeply, and Clara let herself sink into the warmth and safety of his arms. This was home, she realized. Not a place or a building, but this man who had chosen her, who had refused to leave even when leaving would have been easier. They were married 3 days later by a justice of the peace in Laramie. There was no fancy dress or elaborate ceremony, just 2 people standing together and making promises they intended to keep. Cole had managed to find a simple gold band in one of the local shops, and Clara cried when he slipped it onto her finger. "I know it is not much," Cole said, looking uncertain. "It is perfect," Clara told him, meaning it absolutely. "Everything about this is perfect." They spent their wedding night in the small hotel room, learning each other in new and intimate ways. Cole was gentle and patient, treating Clara with a tenderness that made her fall in love with him all over again. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, talking quietly as the moon rose outside their window. "What do you think your parents would have thought of me?" Cole asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. Clara considered the question seriously. "I think they would have loved you. My father would have appreciated your work ethic and your honesty. My mother would have loved how you treat me, how you make me laugh." She paused. "James would have been harder to win over. He was very protective of me." "I would have tried to win him over anyway," Cole said. "He was your brother. That would have mattered." "He was not always bad," Clara said softly. "Before the gambling, before everything fell apart, he was a good brother. He took care of me after our parents died, made sure I had food and a roof over my head. I wish you could have known him then." "I wish I could have too." Cole kissed her temple. "But I am grateful for him anyway, because without him I would never have met you. That sounds terrible, does it not?" "A little bit," Clara admitted, "but I understand what you mean." Everything that happened, all the bad and the painful and the scary, led us to each other. I would not change that, even if I could." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in years, Clara slept without nightmares. They stayed in Laramie for another week, resting and planning their next steps. Cole spent his days investigating land opportunities in the area, talking to ranchers and farmers and anyone else who might know of available property. Clara explored the town, already imagining what their life might look like here. It was smaller than Deadwood but more civilized, with schools and churches and people who seemed to actually care about building a community. In early February, Cole came back to the hotel with news. He had found a piece of land about 20 miles outside of town, a small plot with a creek running through it and good grazing for horses. The owner was an elderly rancher looking to sell off some of his property, and he was willing to part with it for a price Cole could afford. They rode out to see it the next day, and Clara fell in love immediately. The land rolled gently, covered in winter-brown grass that would turn green in spring. The creek ran clear and cold, fed by snowmelt from the mountains. There was a stand of cottonwood trees near the water and open sky stretching in every direction. "What do you think?" Cole asked, watching her face carefully. "I think it is perfect," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "I think we could build something wonderful here." They finalized the purchase a week later, signing papers and shaking hands with the elderly rancher who seemed pleased that the land was going to a young couple starting out. Then they set about the hard work of building their new life. Cole purchased lumber and supplies in town while Clara drew up plans for a house. It would be simple at first, just a few rooms to get them through until they could afford to expand. But it would be theirs, built with their own hands on land they owned outright. They broke ground in late February, as soon as the worst of the winter had passed. The work was brutal and exhausting, but Clara threw herself into it with determination. She learned to hammer nails and saw boards, working alongside Cole from dawn until dusk. Her hands blistered and her muscles ached, but she had never felt more satisfied. Slowly, the house began to take shape. 4 walls and a roof, a door that swung on proper hinges, windows that let in the light. It was not fancy, but it was solid and well built. By the time they finished in early April, Clara could stand in the middle of their one-room cabin and feel pride swelling in her chest. "We did it," she said, looking around at their work. "We actually did it." Cole wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "We did. Welcome home, Mrs. Brennan, Mrs. Brennan." Clara had been using the name for weeks now, but hearing it in Cole's voice still made her heart skip. She was Clara Brennan now, wife of a horse rancher, owner of a piece of Wyoming that was all their own. It was so far from the life she had imagined for herself in Deadwood that it felt like a dream. But it was real. The calluses on her hands were real, the ache in her muscles was real, the man holding her was real. They had built this together, this life and this home, and nobody could take it from them. Over the next months, they settled into a rhythm. Cole spent his days working on the ranch, building fences and corrals to hold the horses he planned to raise. Clara planted a garden, turning the soil and coaxing vegetables to grow in the Wyoming earth. They made trips to town for supplies, slowly becoming known to the other settlers in the area. Word spread that Cole Brennan was good with horses, that he could gentle the wildest bronc and turn it into a reliable working animal. People began bringing him horses to break, paying good money for his skill. Clara took some of their earnings and bought chickens, then a milk cow, building up their little homestead bit by bit. The work was hard and the days were long, but Clara had never been happier. She woke each morning to the sight of Cole sleeping beside her, his face peaceful in the dawn light. She fell asleep each night in his arms, feeling safer and more loved than she had ever thought possible. Summer came, hot and bright, turning the grass golden and the sky an endless blue. Clara's garden flourished, providing them with fresh vegetables and herbs. Cole brought home their first 3 horses, wild mustangs he had purchased from a trader passing through. He worked with them patiently, transforming them from frightened animals into well-trained mounts. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over their land, Clara turned to Cole and said, "I am pregnant." Cole froze, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Then a smile spread across his face, slow and wondering. "Truly, truly. I have suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be sure before I said anything." Clara took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is a baby growing in there, our baby." Cole's eyes shone with tears. He set down his coffee and pulled Clara into his arms, holding her as if she was made of glass. "A baby," he whispered. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, though she could see the answer on his face. Happy does not begin to cover it. Cole pulled back just enough to kiss her, sweet and tender. "You have given me everything, Clara. A home, a life, a future. And now a child. I do not have words for how blessed I feel," Clara cried then, hormones and happiness combining into a storm of emotion. Cole held her through it, murmuring reassurances and promises into her hair. When she finally calmed, he wiped her tears away with gentle fingers and smiled. "We need to build another room onto the house," he said practically. "The baby will need somewhere to sleep." "We have months before that is necessary," Clara pointed out, but she was already planning in her head. A cradle by the window, soft blankets, maybe a rocking chair if they could afford one. They spent the rest of the evening making plans and dreaming about the future. Would the baby be a boy or a girl? Would they have Cole's brown eyes or Clara's hazel ones? What kind of person would they grow up to be? "I hope they have your courage," Cole said. "And your stubbornness. Those are good qualities." "I hope they have your kindness," Clara replied. "And your steadiness. The world needs more people like you." "Then, between the two of us, they will be exceptional," Cole said confidently. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into the fall. Clara continued working in the garden until her belly grew too large to bend comfortably, then switched to lighter tasks around the house. Cole fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and work less, until Clara finally had to tell him firmly that she was pregnant, not dying, and perfectly capable of managing herself. But secretly, she loved his attention. Loved the way he would place his hand on her belly and talk to the baby growing there, telling it stories about the ranch and the horses. Loved the way he would kiss her goodnight and then kiss her stomach too, as if greeting the child they had made together. In November, as the first snows began to fall, Clara went into labor. It was a long and difficult process, made more frightening by the fact that they were miles from town and any doctor. But Cole stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand and offering encouragement, refusing to leave even when she screamed at him that this was all his fault. Finally, as dawn broke over the snow-covered land, Clara delivered a healthy baby boy. He came into the world wailing his displeasure at the cold air, his tiny fists waving. Cole wrapped him in a blanket and placed him carefully in Clara's arms, and they both stared down at the small miracle they had created. "He is perfect," Cole breathed, his voice full of wonder. "He is," Clara agreed, exhausted but elated. The baby had Cole's dark hair and a determined expression that already reminded her of his father. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the past months, running through options and never quite settling on one that felt right. But looking down at their son now, Clara knew exactly what his name should be. "James," she said softly. "I want to name him James Cole Brennan, after my brother and his father, the two men who gave me my life in different ways." Cole's eyes went bright with tears. "James," he repeated. "I like that. It is a strong name for a strong boy." Little James Cole Brennan settled into their lives with surprising ease. He was a good baby, sleeping for long stretches and rarely fussing unless he was hungry. Clara took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, learning how to nurse and change diapers and soothe a crying infant. Cole was a devoted father from the start. He would hold James for hours, walking him around the small cabin and telling him stories about the horses and the land. He built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, carving intricate designs into the sides. He was gentle and patient and completely besotted with his son. Winter passed slowly. The three of them cocooned in their little cabin while the snow piled up outside. Clara mended clothes by the fire while James nursed. Cole worked on tack and equipment, preparing for the spring. They talked about expanding the house and buying more horses and all the ways their life would grow. Spring came eventually, as it always did, melting the snow and turning the world green again. Clara planted her garden with James strapped to her back in a sling, and Cole started working with a new batch of horses he had purchased. Life moved forward in its steady rhythm, each day building on the last. On a warm afternoon in May, as Clara was weeding her garden and watching James sleep in the shade nearby, she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw a familiar figure driving toward the house. Martha from the boarding house in Deadwood climbed down from the wagon, grinning widely. "I hope you do not mind unexpected visitors," she called, "but I had to see for myself that you two were all right." Clara let out a whoop of joy and ran to embrace the older woman. They stood in the yard hugging and laughing while Cole came out of the barn to see what the commotion was about. When he recognized Martha, he smiled and came over to greet her as well. "What are you doing here?" Clara asked, still holding Martha's hands. "How did you even find us?" "It was not easy, I assure you, but you did write to me with your general location, and I may have asked around town until someone directed me here." Martha looked around at the cabin and the land, her expression approving. "You have built something good here. I am proud of you both." "Come inside," Cole said. "You must be tired from the journey. Stay for supper at least, or longer if you can." Martha ended up staying for 3 days, catching them up on all the news from Deadwood. Dutch Keller's organization had collapsed not long after they left, torn apart by infighting and law enforcement pressure. Keller himself had disappeared, some said to California, others to Mexico. The store Clara had once owned had been sold to a merchant from Denver. "The whole town is different now," Martha said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars come out. "More respectable, I suppose you could say, not sure if that is better or worse." "I am glad I left," Clara said honestly. "There was nothing for me there but bad memories." Martha looked at her, then at Cole, then at baby James sleeping peacefully in his cradle. "No, I can see that you found what you needed here. I am happy for you, Clara. You deserve this happiness after everything you have been through." "Thank you," Clara said, her throat tight with emotion. "For everything you did for me back then, I would not have survived without your help." "Nonsense. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You would have found a way." Martha stood, stretching. "But I am glad I could help, even if it was just by providing a safe place to stay." When Martha left a few days later, Clara hugged her tightly and made her promise to visit again. As the wagon disappeared down the road, Clara felt a sense of closure settling over her. That chapter of her life was truly over now, acknowledged and accepted and finally left behind. The years passed, each one building on the last. The ranch grew, expanding from 3 horses to a dozen, then 2 dozen. Cole's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and people came from all over Wyoming and beyond to purchase his animals or have him break their wildest broncs. Money was never plentiful, but there was always enough to get by and occasionally splurge on something special. James grew into an energetic toddler, then a curious child, always underfoot and asking questions. He loved the horses as much as his father did, spending hours in the barn watching Cole work. Clara taught him his letters and numbers at the kitchen table, determined that her son would have the education she had missed. When James was 3, Clara found herself pregnant again. This time she delivered a daughter with Cole's dark hair and Clara's hazel eyes. They named her Sarah Elizabeth, after Clara's mother. She was a calm baby, the opposite of her boisterous brother, content to watch the world from her mother's arms. 2 years after that came another son, Michael. with red hair that neither parent could account for, until Cole remembered that his grandmother had been Irish with hair like fire. Michael was loud and fearless from the start, climbing everything he could reach and giving his parents constant heart attacks. The cabin expanded room by room to accommodate their growing family. Cole and Clara built additions with their own hands, just as they had built everything else in their lives. By the time Michael was walking, they had a proper house with multiple bedrooms, a kitchen large enough for all of them to eat together, and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Clara sometimes stood on that porch in the evening, watching her children play in the yard and her husband work with the horses in the corral, and marveled at how far they had come. 10 years ago, she had been alone and terrified in Deadwood, certain she was going to die. Now she had a family, a home, a life so full of love and purpose that it sometimes overwhelmed her. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked one such evening, coming to stand beside her on the porch. Gray threaded through his dark hair now, and lines creased the corners of his eyes, but to Clara he was just as handsome as the day they met. "I am thinking about how lucky we are," she said, leaning into his side. "How different things could have been." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Cole replied, wrapping his arm around her waist. "We built this together through hard work and determination." "And love," Clara added. "Do not forget love." "How could I?" Cole turned her to face him, his brown eyes warm with affection. "I have loved you from the moment you stood behind that counter looking scared but refusing to show it. I love you now, covered in flour from baking bread and yelling at our children to come in for supper. And I will love you when we are old and gray and sitting on this porch watching our grandchildren play. Nothing is ever going to change that." Clara kissed him, slow and sweet, tasting of years and promises kept. "Everyone leaves eventually," she murmured against his lips. "And I will be the last," Cole responded, just like he had all those years ago. "I promised you that, and I meant it." They stood together on the porch as the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The children called from inside, demanding dinner and attention. The horses whinnied in their corrals. Life continued in all its messy, beautiful glory. Clara thought back to that day in the general store when a bullet had shattered her window and her world. She thought about the cowboy who had walked in offering help when she had every reason to refuse it. She thought about all the moments of fear and doubt, the times she had nearly given up or run away, but she had not given up. She had chosen to trust, to hope, to believe that maybe this time would be different, and it had been. Cole had kept his promise. He had been the last one to stay. As they walked back inside to their children and their dinner and their ordinary, extraordinary life, Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Not for the easy things or the comfortable moments, but for the struggle and the fight and the choice to keep believing even when it seemed impossible. Love was not about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up day after day, through sickness and health, through good times and bad, through all the small and large challenges that life threw at you. It was about choosing each other over and over again, building something together that was stronger than either of you could create alone. Cole had shown her that. He had sat down all those years ago and promised to be the last, and he had spent every day since proving that promise true. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered, because she mattered. They ate dinner as a family, the table crowded and loud with the chaos of 3 young children. James told them about the new colt in the barn. Sarah carefully described the butterfly she had seen in the garden. Michael mostly focused on getting more food into his mouth than on his face, with limited success. After dinner, they cleaned up together, a well-practiced routine developed over years of partnership. Clara washed while Cole dried. The children were supposed to put things away, but mostly they chased each other around the kitchen until their parents shooed them off to get ready for bed. Bedtime was another ritual, stories and prayers and goodnight kisses. Cole tucked in James and Michael while Clara settled Sarah in her small bed. Then they met in the doorway and stood for a moment, looking at their sleeping children with the kind of wonder that never quite faded. "We did good," Cole whispered. "We did," Clara agreed. They retreated to their own room, the small sanctuary they had carved out at the back of the house. The bed was the same one they had bought all those years ago in Laramie, worn but comfortable, full of memories. They undressed and climbed under the quilts Clara had sewn, and Cole pulled her close. "I am tired," Clara said, snuggling into his warmth. "You are always tired. 3 children will do that." Cole kissed the top of her head. "But you are happy too, right?" "Deliriously," Clara confirmed. "Some days I cannot believe this is my life. That I get to wake up next to you every morning and raise our children and work on this land we built together. It feels like more than I deserve." "You deserve everything good in the world," Cole said fiercely. "Everything and more. I wish I could give it all to you. You already have." Clara tilted her head back to look at him in the dim light filtering through the curtains. "You gave me a future when I thought I had none. You gave me love when I had forgotten what it felt like. You gave me a family and a home and a reason to believe that good things can last." "What more could I possibly want?" Cole smiled and kissed her, tender and sweet. "Nothing, I hope, because this is all I have to offer, just me and this ranch and whatever life we can build together." "That is more than enough," Clara whispered. "That is everything." They lay in the darkness, wrapped around each other, and talked about nothing and everything. Plans for tomorrow, dreams for the future, memories of the past. The easy conversation of 2 people who had spent years learning each other inside and out. Eventually, Clara drifted off to sleep, safe and warm and loved. In her dreams, she saw the years stretching ahead of them, full of more children and growing grandchildren, of horses and land and the simple joys of a life well lived. She saw Cole beside her through all of it, steady as a mountain, constant as the sun rising each morning. She saw the promise he had made, fulfilled 1,000 times over in small and large ways. In the coffee he brought her each morning, in the way he still opened doors for her after all these years, in the patience he showed their children and the devotion he showed to the land, they worked together. In every choice he made to stay, to show up, to be present even when it was hard or boring or thankless. "Everyone leaves eventually," she had told him once, the words born of grief and loss. And he had sat down and promised to be the last, to be the one who stayed when everyone else was gone. It had seemed impossible at the time, a promise too big to keep. But here they were, 10 years later, and he was still beside her, still choosing her every single day, still making good on the promise that had changed her entire world. Clara woke once in the night to check on a crying Sarah, soothing the little girl back to sleep with gentle words and a soft lullaby. When she returned to bed, Cole rolled over and pulled her close without fully waking, his arm heavy and warm across her waist. She listened to his breathing slow back into sleep and felt her own eyes grow heavy. This was love, she thought drowsily. Not the fairy tale kind with princes and castles, but the real kind. The kind that showed up when bullets were flying and stood between you and danger. The kind that built houses and planted gardens and changed diapers at 2 in the morning. The kind that kept promises even when it would be easier to break them. The kind that lasted. Morning came too early, as it always did on a working ranch. Cole was up first, dressing quietly in the gray pre-dawn light. Clara stirred and he leaned over to kiss her forehead. "Go back to sleep," he whispered. "I will handle the horses this morning." "You always say that," Clara murmured, already sitting up. "But we both know I will be up in 5 minutes anyway." Cole smiled and headed out to start his day. Clara took those 5 minutes to lie in bed and watch the sky lighten through the window, preparing herself for the organized chaos of another day with 3 young children and a ranch to run. But she did not mind. Each day was a gift, each morning a promise renewed. They had built this life together from nothing, 2 broken people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and decided to stay. Whatever challenges came their way, they would face them together. Clara rose and dressed, then went to wake the children. James was already up, pulling on his boots, eager to help his father in the barn. Sarah had to be coaxed from sleep with gentle words and the promise of pancakes. Michael was deeply asleep and protested loudly when Clara lifted him from his bed, though he settled as soon as she started carrying him toward the kitchen. Another day began, full of the small tasks and large joys that made up their lives. Breakfast to cook, children to feed, lessons to teach, horses to train, a garden to tend. Hours filled with work and laughter and the occasional tantrum, with skinned knees and whispered secrets and all the tiny moments that added up to a family. And through it all, Cole and Clara moved in practiced harmony, two people who had learned to read each other so well that words were often unnecessary. A glance across the kitchen table communicated entire conversations. A hand on a shoulder offered reassurance and support. Small gestures made meaningful through years of repetition. The seasons turned as they always did. Summer faded into autumn, autumn into winter, winter into spring. The children grew taller and more capable. The ranch expanded. More horses, more land, more hired hands to help with the work. Their reputation grew throughout the territory, and people came from increasingly far distances to buy Cole's horses or seek his expertise. Money became less tight, allowing for small luxuries they had never been able to afford before. New dresses for Clara and the children. A proper saddle for James. Books ordered from back east. A piano shipped by train to Laramie and then hauled by wagon to their ranch, a gift from Cole to Clara, who had mentioned once, years ago, that her mother had played. Clara cried when she saw it, this beautiful instrument sitting in their living room. She had not played since she was a child, but her fingers remembered the patterns. Soon the house was filled with music, simple melodies at first, then more complex pieces as her skill returned. The children would gather around while she played, and Cole would lean in the doorway and watch with such love on his face that it made her heart ache. These were the years of plenty, of growth and expansion and dreams coming true. They were not without challenges. Harsh winters that killed livestock, droughts that withered crops, the constant financial pressure of running a ranch. But they faced each obstacle together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they had built. When Clara was 35, 2 decades after that fateful day in Deadwood, she stood at her kitchen window and watched her oldest son work with a young horse in the corral. James was 18 now, a man grown with his father's patience and his mother's determination. He was courting a girl from town, a sweet-faced rancher's daughter named Emma, and Clara suspected a wedding was not far off. Sarah at 15 was her mother's shadow, helping in the kitchen and garden, reading every book she could get her hands on. She talked about becoming a teacher someday, about opening a school in Laramie where children could get a proper education. Clara encouraged her dreams, remembering how limited her own options had been at that age. Michael at 13 was all energy and mischief, more interested in adventure than responsibility. He drove his parents to distraction regularly, but his heart was good and his laughter was infectious. He would find his way eventually, Clara believed. He just needed time to figure out who he was meant to be, 3 children raised, a ranch built from nothing, a marriage that had not only survived but thrived. Clara thought about the woman she had been in Deadwood, scared and alone and certain that everything she loved would be taken from her. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that it would be all right, that the cowboy with the steady eyes was telling the truth when he promised to stay. But maybe that woman had needed to learn it for herself. Maybe the only way to truly believe in lasting love was to experience it day after day, year after year, until the proof became undeniable. Cole came in from the barn as the sun was setting, dusty and tired from a long day. He washed up at the pump, then came to stand beside Clara at the window. They watched their son work with the horse, both of them sharing a moment of parental pride. "He is good with them," Cole said, "better than I was at his age." "He learned from the best," Clara replied, leaning into her husband's solid warmth. "You taught him well." "We taught him well," Cole corrected. This is not just my doing, Clara. Everything we have built, it is ours together. I could not have done any of it without you. Clara turned to face him fully, studying the face she knew better than her own. Cole was in his 50s now, his dark hair more gray than black, his face lined with the years of hard work and outdoor living. But his eyes were the same, warm and steady and full of love when they looked at her. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Walking into that store, making yourself part of my problems? You could have had an easier life if you had just kept walking." Cole cupped her face in his calloused hands. "I have never regretted a single moment, not one. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara. You and our children and this life we share. If I could go back and do it all again, I would make the same choices every time, even when I am stubborn and difficult, especially then." Cole kissed her, still sweet after all these years. "I told you I would be the last, remember? That promise did not come with conditions. I am here for all of it, the good and the bad, the easy and the hard. Until the day I die, and maybe even after that if there is an afterlife where I can haunt you." Clara laughed, her eyes wet with tears. "I love you, Cole Brennan. I have loved you for 20 years, and I will love you for 20 more and 20 after that." "That is good," Cole said, pulling her close. "Because I plan on loving you forever, and it would be awkward if you stopped loving me back." They stood together in the kitchen as the evening light faded, two people who had chosen each other and kept on choosing each other through every trial and triumph. Outside, their son finished working with the horse and led it back to the barn. Their daughter called from upstairs that supper was ready. Their youngest came thundering down the stairs, making enough noise for 3 children. This was their life. Ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Built on the foundation of a promise made and kept, of love given and returned, of 2 people who had both known loss and chosen to risk loving anyway. Clara had believed once that everyone leaves eventually. That loss was inevitable, and attachment was foolish. But Cole had proven her wrong in the most profound way possible. Not by denying that loss exists, not by pretending that pain is not real, but by showing up anyway. By choosing to love despite the risk, to commit despite the uncertainty, to stay despite how much easier it would be to leave. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift possible. Not just his presence, but the restoration of her faith in the possibility of lasting love. The proof that sometimes, if you are very lucky, you find someone who means it when they say they will be the last. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Cole and Clara sat on their porch and watched the stars come out. It was their ritual, this quiet time at the end of each day, a chance to reconnect and remember that beneath all the roles they played, parents, ranchers, business owners, they were still just 2 people in love. "James is going to propose to Emma," Cole said, breaking the comfortable silence. "He asked me for permission last week." "I know, Emma told me. She is nervous but excited." Clara smiled into the darkness. "We are going to be grandparents eventually. Can you believe that?" "No," Cole admitted. "It seems impossible that we are old enough for that. But I suppose time keeps moving whether we are ready or not." They sat in silence for a while longer, contemplating the passage of years and the changes that came with it. Then Clara said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For keeping your promise. For being the last." Clara took his hand, threading their fingers together. "For showing me that sometimes people do stay, that sometimes love does last. You changed my entire world that day in the store, and you have been changing it for the better every day since." Cole brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I told you I would be the last, and I meant it. Whatever comes next, whatever years we have left, I will be here beside you. That is not a burden or an obligation, it is the greatest privilege of my life." They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside, then climbed into bed and held each other in the darkness. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwood trees, and the horses shifted in their stalls, and the land they had built their life on settled into sleep. And as Clara drifted off in her husband's arms, she thought about how far they had come from that day 20 years ago. From bullets and fear to peace and plenty. From loneliness and loss to family and love. From a woman who believed everyone leaves to a woman who knew with absolute certainty that Cole Brennan would be beside her until the very end, because he had promised. And Cole Brennan always kept his promises. Years continued to unfold, bringing their share of joy and sorrow as all years do. James married his Emma in a beautiful ceremony on the ranch, and Clara cried happy tears as she watched her son take his vows. Sarah did indeed become a teacher, opening a small school in Laramie where she taught reading and arithmetic to children who otherwise would have had no formal education. Michael left home at 20 to seek adventure in the wider world, though he returned often with stories that made his parents both laugh and worry. Grandchildren arrived, first one, then another, then a whole passel of them. The house that Clara and Cole had built together rang once again with the sounds of children's laughter. Clara taught her grandchildren to bake bread and tend gardens just as she had taught her own children. Cole taught them about horses and integrity and the importance of keeping your word. They grew older together, their hair going white, their movements becoming slower and more careful. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it deepened, seasoned by decades of shared experience and mutual support. They knew each other completely, could anticipate each other's needs, finished each other's sentences. On the morning of their 40th wedding anniversary, Cole woke before dawn as usual. But instead of immediately rising to tend the horses, he lay in bed and watched Clara sleep. Her face was lined now, marked by time and sun and laughter. To him, she was just as beautiful as the day he had met her, maybe more so, because now he knew the depths of her strength and resilience. Clara stirred and opened her eyes to find him watching her. "What are you doing?" She murmured, her voice rough with sleep. "Counting my blessings," Cole replied. 40 years, Clara. 40 years since we stood in front of that judge in Laramie and promised to love each other forever. That is a long time." "It went by too fast," Clara said, reaching out to touch his face. "I blinked and suddenly we were old. How did that happen?" "The same way everything happens. One day at a time, one choice at a time." Cole caught her hand and held it against his heart. "But I would not trade a single day of it, not one." They celebrated quietly that night, just the two of them on the porch they had sat on countless times before. Their children had offered to throw them a party, but Clara and Cole declined. This anniversary was for them alone, a chance to reflect on the decades they had shared and the life they had built. "Do you remember that day in the store?" Clara asked, sipping the wine Sarah had brought them from town. "When you walked in and offered to help me?" "Like it was yesterday," Cole said. "You looked so fierce and frightened all at once, I knew immediately that you were someone special. I told you everyone leaves eventually, and I sat down and told you I would be the last." Cole smiled at the memory. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. Though I hope we have many more years together before either of us has to make good on that promise." "I hope so too," Clara said softly. "I am not ready to say goodbye to this life or to you. There is still so much I want to do, so much I want to see." "Then we will do it together," Cole promised. "Whatever time we have left, we will make it count." And they did. They traveled to see parts of Wyoming they had never visited. They spent long afternoons with their grandchildren, passing on stories and wisdom. They sat on their porch and watched the sun rise and set over the land they had built their lives on, finding new appreciation for each ordinary, extraordinary day. When Clara was 67, she fell ill with a fever that would not break. The doctor came from town, did what he could, but admitted that at her age, with her weakened constitution from a lifetime of hard work, the outcome was uncertain. Cole sat by her bedside day and night, refusing to leave, holding her hand and talking to her even when she was too delirious to respond. The children gathered, faces drawn with worry. The grandchildren were kept away but sent notes and drawings that Cole read aloud to Clara in her lucid moments. The house that had always been so full of life and laughter became hushed, waiting. For 3 days, Clara hovered between life and death. And through it all, Cole stayed beside her, keeping his vigil. He told her stories about their life together, reminded her of all the reasons she needed to fight. He promised her more sunrises and more grandchildren and more years together if she would just hold on. On the fourth morning, Clara's fever broke. She opened her eyes to find Cole slumped in the chair beside her bed, still holding her hand, his face haggard with exhaustion and worry. She squeezed his fingers weakly and croaked his name. Cole's head snapped up, and the relief that flooded his face was almost painful to see. "Clara, thank God, I thought I was losing you." "Not yet," Clara whispered. "We still have more life to live together. You promised me, remember?" Cole laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and tears. "I did. And I always keep my promises." Clara recovered slowly over the following weeks, her strength returning bit by bit. Cole nursed her with the same patience and devotion he had shown breaking horses, never complaining about the extra work or the disruption to his routine. And when she was finally well enough to walk outside and sit on the porch again, Clara looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You could have lost me," she said. "After all these years, after everything we have built, you could have been left alone." "But I was not," Cole replied firmly. "You fought to stay and I fought to keep you, and we won. That is all that matters. I am not immortal, Cole. Eventually, one of us is going to have to say goodbye to the other. That is the price of loving someone for a lifetime. I know." Cole took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "But when that day comes, whenever it comes, we will face it the same way we have faced everything else. Together for as long as we can. And the one left behind will carry on, holding the memories of what we shared." Clara nodded, accepting the truth of it. They had been given 47 years together, far more than many people got. Whatever time remained, whether it was days or decades, she would be grateful for every moment. They lived on into their 70s and then their 80s. Their bodies grew frail, but their minds remained sharp, and their love for each other never wavered. They needed help with the ranch now, leaning on their children and grandchildren to do the physical work they no longer could. But they were still the heart of the place, the foundation everything else was built on. On a warm spring day when Cole was 82, he and Clara sat on their porch watching the sunset. It had become harder for both of them to move around, but they could still manage this. Could still sit together and watch the day end over the land they loved. "I have been thinking," Cole said, his voice roughened by age, "about what comes after." "After what?" Clara asked, though she knew, "After one of us is gone." "I know we have talked about it before, but I want you to understand something." Cole turned to look at her, his brown eyes still clear and steady despite his advanced years. "If I go first, I need you to keep living, really living, not just existing. You are strong enough to go on without me, and I need to know you will." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "And if I go first, then I will do the same. Because that is what we do for the people we love. We keep their memory alive by living fully, by finding joy despite the grief." Cole reached for her hand. "But until then, we have right now, this moment, and that is enough." They sat together until the stars came out, two old people who had loved each other for most of their lives. When the cold finally drove them inside, they moved slowly, helping each other navigate the steps they had climbed thousands of times before. They went to bed in the same room where they had slept for decades, and Cole held Clara close, grateful for one more day together. "I love you," Clara murmured into the darkness. "I love you too," Cole replied, "and I always will. Even after I am gone, even when you cannot see me or hear me anymore, my love will still be here. That does not end." "Promise me something," Clara said. "Anything." "Promise me that if you go first, you will wait for me. Wherever there is after this, promise you will be there when I arrive." Cole kissed her forehead gently. "I promise. I told you I would be the last, remember. That means I will be there at the end, waiting to take your hand and walk with you into whatever comes next. You will never be alone, Clara. Not while I exist in any form." They fell asleep in each other's arms, and Clara dreamed of the day they met. Of a scared woman behind a counter and a cowboy who had promised to stay. Of all the years between that moment and this one, filled with love and work and family, and all the things that made a life worth living, Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, at the age of 84. He simply did not wake up one morning, his hand still clasped in Clara's. She sat with him for a long time, memorizing his peaceful face, grateful that he had been spared a long, painful decline. He had lived well and died well, surrounded by the love he had built over a lifetime. The funeral was well attended, with people coming from all over Wyoming to pay their respects to a man who had been known for his integrity and kindness. Clara stood dry-eyed through most of it, holding the hands of her children and grandchildren, finding strength in the family they had created together. It was only later, when everyone had gone and she was alone in the house they had shared for so many decades, that Clara finally allowed herself to break. She sat in Cole's chair on the porch and wept for the man who had kept every promise he ever made to her. The man who had walked into her life at exactly the right moment and refused to leave. The man who had shown her that lasting love was not just possible but probable if you found the right person and did the work. "You kept your word," she whispered into the empty night. "You were the last to leave. And now I am the one left behind, just like you warned me. But I am not really alone, am I? You are still here in this house we built, in the children we raised, in every memory we made together." She stayed on the ranch, cared for by her children who refused to let her be alone. She spent her days sitting on the porch, tending a small garden, playing the piano Cole had given her all those years ago. She talked to him constantly, telling him about the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, sharing jokes and memories, keeping him alive through the simple act of remembering. 3 years after Cole's death, on a cool autumn evening, Clara sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the land they had built together. She felt peaceful, ready in a way she had not been before. She had lived fully in these last years, honoring Cole's request that she not simply exist but truly live. She had found joy despite her grief, had celebrated her family, had made new memories even without him by her side. But she was tired now. Tired in her bones, in her soul, ready to rest. Ready to see what came next. That night, Clara Brennan passed away in her sleep, peacefully and without pain. She was 87 years old and had lived a full, rich life. Her children mourned but also celebrated, knowing that she was with Cole again, wherever souls go when bodies wear out. They buried her beside Cole on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the big cottonwood trees where the creek ran clear. The headstones were simple, marking the lives of 2 people who had built something lasting in a transient world. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations just as Clara and Cole had hoped. Their great-great-grandchildren would eventually work the same land, gentle the same bloodline of horses, sit on the same porch and watch the same sunsets. The love story that had begun with a bullet through a window and a cowboy's promise became part of the family lore, told and retold until it took on the weight of legend. But at its heart, it was a simple story. A story about 2 people who found each other when they needed each other most. About a woman who had been taught by loss that everyone leaves, and a man who sat down and promised to be the last. About choosing love despite fear, about building a life together through hard work and determination, about keeping promises even when it would be easier to break them. It was a story about what it means to truly stay, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually, in all the ways that matter. To show up day after day, year after year, through good times and bad, through youth and age, through everything life throws at you. To love someone so completely that you become part of each other, so intertwined that even death cannot fully separate you. Everyone leaves eventually. That much is true. But some people become so woven into the fabric of your life that they never really leave at all. They live on in memories and children and the mark they left on the world. They live on in the lessons they taught and the love they gave and the example they set. Cole Brennan had promised to be the last, and in every way that mattered, he kept that promise. He was there at the beginning of Clara's new life, and he was there at the end of it. And in all the years between, he showed her what it meant to be truly loved, truly seen, truly valued. That was his gift to her. Not just his presence, but his unwavering commitment. Not just his love, but his faithfulness. Not just his promise, but his follow-through, and Clara's gift to him was equally profound. She had chosen to trust when trust seemed impossible. She had opened her heart when it would have been safer to keep it closed. She had taken a chance on love when all her experience told her it was foolish to do so. Together, they had created something beautiful. A family, a legacy, a love story that would be remembered long after they were gone. They had proven that sometimes, if you are very lucky and very brave, you find someone who means it when they say forever. The sun set over the Wyoming ranch one final time in this story, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. The horses whinnied in their corrals. The creek babbled over smooth stones. The cottonwood trees rustled in the evening breeze, and somewhere beyond sight, beyond knowing, two souls found each other again. Clara opened her eyes to find Cole waiting just as he had promised. He smiled at her, that same steady smile that had first made her heart skip all those decades ago, and held out his hand. "I told you I would be the last," he said. Clara took his hand, feeling the familiar warmth and strength of it, and smiled back. "You kept your promise." "Always," Cole replied, "and now we have forever." They walked together into whatever lay beyond, hand in hand, two people who had loved each other through an entire lifetime and would love each other through whatever came next. The promise made in a general store in Deadwood had been kept, had been honored, had been lived out in every possible way. Everyone leaves eventually. But Cole Brennan had been the last to leave, and in doing so, he had given Clara the greatest gift possible. The knowledge that lasting love is real, that some people do stay, that promises can be kept. And that gift, that knowledge, that love, lived on long after they were both gone, carried forward by generations who would tell their story and find hope in it. Hope that they too might find someone who promises to be the last. Hope that they too might build something that lasts. Hope that love, real love, is worth every risk and every fear. The story ends as all stories must, but the love it chronicled goes on forever, written into the land and the family and the very air of the Wyoming ranch where it all began. Two people met, fell in love, built a life, and kept their promises to each other until the very end and beyond. What more could anyone ask from love than that?